that we may know the person of the risen Christ, that we may know Him, that we may really know Him. You know, I stop and I think about that and I realize something that what Paul is saying here is the one who created us, the one who died for us, the one who loved us. He gives us the privilege that we may know Him. Paul was preaching in a time and reading in a time and ministering in a time when they had gods galore. In fact, the Greek gods were on the scene and they were being talked about. We marvel at it, studying it in history, but one of the things that we see is that the Greeks desired and they wanted to have a relationship with the gods, but the gods were immoral. And so the relationship that they could have with a god was immoral and it was untrustworthy and it was unhealthy because they were not really gods. They were projections of humanity placed upon the God, but yet this God who is the real God, this God who is the true God that created the heavens and the earth, this God is the God of love who said this, I want to have a relationship with my creation. And He proved it by coming and living among us. Jesus lived on this earth and He lived a perfect life and a sinless life. Why? So that He might die a perfect and sinless death for us. And He did it so that He would know who we are, that He would encounter us. Now, I read this and I realize something. Paul had a personal encounter with Jesus after He rose from the dead. When Paul was on the way to Damascus and he saw Him and there was this personal encounter. But I want you to understand something. I believe that all of us can have a personal encounter with Jesus Christ, and we should and we need it and we ought to have it, and it can happen every single day. We can know Him. We can fellowship with Him. Is our priority to know Him? You see, when my priority is to know Him, then all of a sudden it's not the power of me, it's the power of Him. When my priority is to know Him, it's not my personality, it's His personality moving through me. When it is my priority to know Him, all of a sudden it's what He wants in my life, not what I want in my life. And I find that what He wants in my life is so much better. Because that's where the real power source is. This past weekend we had a trip that I didn't know we were going to have a week ago. You know, it's one of those fun things, but earlier in the week we made the decision that we were going to go. I think it was twofold. Carson called and said, my car won't crank. So I said, well, you need to jump off the car. He said, okay. So he tried to jump off the car and it would crank, but he said, Dad, every time I stop it, he said, I turn it off, it won't crank again. I said, that's simple. I said, you need to go buy a battery. No, that's not what it is. Don't you love 18-year-old boys? No, that's not what it is. Okay, what is it? I don't know, but that's not what it is. All right, so I went through all the scenarios of what it was and everything else, and in the meantime, he's talking to his mama, and his mama then begins to talk to me, and it became my priority to go on Valentine's Day with my wife to see my son in Kentucky. Because it's what she wanted to do, and I felt like, and so she's like, we're going to drive it home, we're going to get it in the mechanic. I said, I think it's the battery, but I'm not sure. I think it is. And I'm not mechanical, so I doubt myself. I mean, I can do some things, but I can't do that. I'm not Brian. No, I can tinker. I'm a tinkerer, but I'm a tearer-upper. And then when I tear it up, I don't know what to do, and so it always costs me more. And so I'm like, but I just think that's what it is. And we got there and we jumped it off, and sure enough, it cranked right away. Drove beautifully. This old car drove beautifully. We're driving all over Williamsburg, Kentucky, and all of a sudden I got people honking their horn at me, and I'm thinking, what are they doing? And it dawned on me they thought it was my son, you know. And so I tried to behave, to honor his reputation, and so. Finally, we turned it off and tried to crank it, and guess what? It wouldn't crank. So I felt like it's got to be the battery. It's got to be the battery. So I went, bought a battery, put a battery in, cranked. It was the battery. It was the battery. You see, we had the wrong power source in there. We had the power source that wouldn't operate the vehicle without external help. We had to go through the difficulty of jumping it off in order to get it going. What happens is that you and I are already saved if we know Jesus as our Savior, and yet when our priorities are out of whack, we can't operate our life because we're having to go to church, or we're having to go to somebody else and hang around with them and get jumped off in order to operate our life, and we stay in a constant state of lack of power because we're burned out. And what happens is that we need to raise from the dead. We need a new battery. Now, it doesn't mean we need to get saved again. Don't misunderstand me. I think that once you're saved, I don't believe you've lost that. I really don't. But I do think there are times that we need what I call an old-fashioned church word called revival. And that's the new battery. When we get our priorities back in order and we start recognizing and realizing that Jesus wants to do a new work in our life, and it comes through knowing Him. First priority, I need to know Him, and I need to know Him every day and fellowship with Him every day.